Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to talk about something absolutely crucial, that is securing our .NET UI Web API using JWT tokens and Microsoft Entra ID. Whether you are building internal tools or public APIs, security is non-negotiable. We will break this down into four main sections. First one, why securing your web API is important. Second, what JWT tokens are and how they work. And third, what Microsoft Entra ID is and why you should use it. And finally, how to implement all of this in .NET AI Web API in step-by-step process. No further delay, let's get started. Let's discuss about why securing web API is important. When you expose APIs over the internet or even inside a company network, you are opening the door to potential misuse. APIs are often the backbone of modern applications, carrying sensitive data like user information, transactions, or business logic. If left them unsecured, here's what could go wrong. Unauthorized access to data or services, data breaches and compliance violations, potential account takeover or identity spoofing. This is why we secure APIs using proper authentication and authorization mechanisms. And in this video, we will be using JWT tokens and Microsoft Entra ID to ensure only authorized users can access your APIs. Let's discuss next topic, what is JWT token? JWT stands for JSON Web Token. It's a compact, self-contained way to securely transmit information between two parties as a JSON object. A JWT token typically has three parts: header, payload, signature. Header contains metadata like algorithm and token type, and payload contains claims like user ID, roles, tenant ID, etc. And signature ensures the token wasn't tampered with. And next, what is Microsoft Entra ID? Microsoft Entra ID, formerly known as Azure Active Directory, is Microsoft's cloud-based identity and access management service. It helps developers to authenticate users, manage user identities, implement secure single sign-on, and finally authorize access to APIs and applications. With Entra ID, we can register applications, configure permissions, and allow secure access using industry standards like OAuth 2.0 and OpenID Connect. Let's secure our web API. For that, we have to go to Azure portal and then we have to register one app for our application. And for this, I am giving a secure API with the JWT. Let's register our app to secure our API with the minimal changes. And once you register, you can see there is a expose an API. So here we are going to add our application URI ID. So this will use for once we get into the deeper in our implementation. Adding the scope with access as user, name as access as user, and allows admins and users both, and also fill the required whatever the required fields we have to create the scope, and then we just add the scope. So we done scope creation. Now let's create a simple web API using .NET 8. Here I am giving a project name as Secure API using JWT. Why? Because here we are using JWT token to authenticate. And the solution name will be Secure API. In future, more secure topics will cover in the same solution. And let's create with whatever the default settings we have. Here I'm not going to change anything. Whatever the default template created code, we are using the same code with same endpoint. Here we have a weather forecast endpoint that is given by the template Visual Studio, and we just run the API whether it is working fine or not, and let's see executing the endpoint for weather forecast. Here we go. We are getting the success message as 200 and will response with the response. So now let's implement our authentication. So to secure our endpoint, we have to add the dependent packages. Those are we need to add two packages. One is Microsoft.identity.web and one more Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Authentication.JWT barrier. So this will help our endpoint to access through header authorization header with the JWT barrier token. For this JWT barrier package, we have to uh, verify the version. Here we are using .NET 8, so we have to downgrade the version and then install into our application. Once it's done, let's implementing our authentication process. So now go to program.cs and add our required code to implement authentication and authorization process. Let's define our authentication. For that, we have to use builder.services.add authentication. So to provide what kind of authentication we have to use JWT barrier defaults dot authentication scheme. So here we are providing what kind of authentication that we are going to implement here, and then to add Microsoft Identity Web API to configure our whatever the JWT token that is receiving to validate the details. So for that we have to add the required details in our app settings.json. So I have just quickly whatever the required things I have made it a note and then added for the quick implementation, and then what is the required fields that we have to get in from the Azure portal. So just copy them and then replace whatever the required things that we have to do. And once it is done, here you can see add swagger gen is by default it is given, and because of this one we will see the endpoints in the swagger, but we are not able to add the header port to the endpoints. So for that I click removing and then adding what is the required thing. So here it is not a main concept, so that's the reason I just copy paste the required things to done shorter video. And let's see, here we are able to uh, add the JWT token here to authorize our endpoint. So now let's make the changes in endpoint as well and move to our endpoint. What is the required endpoint that we are going to secure, and add authorize attribute for that. Now let's quickly run our application and then see whether the endpoint is validating the user or not. So once we execute here, you can see there is a 401 unauthorized. So that we need to pass JWT token for authorize the user. So for that, I'm using Postman to generate a JWT token. So here I'm passing whatever the required fields and require the information to generate the JWT token. So here I'm changing all, adding the required things in the body of the to generate the JWT token. For that we need one client secret. So we are adding one client secret to generate a JWT token and add it into the Postman. And also copy the application URI ID. So here copying and pasting in the scope. Here we go, we get a JWT access token. So let's copy this one and paste it in Swagger to access our endpoint. Let's run one more time our endpoint. and still we are getting 401, but here the barrier token is added in our header as an authorization. Just quickly validate our JWT token, and here audience will be matching. So just validate once again. Why we are getting 401 still means we need to add app roles because we are using JWT token instead of user. So for that, application has to be authenticate itself. So for that, we have to create an app role, and that will be allowed for application. And once you created the app role, we have to go to app permission and add as a permission as an application permission. So whatever we have created app role, that we have to add as an application permission and grant that as a consent, admin consent. And then once you're all done, once again clear cache for creating the access token. Once you clear the cache, because sometimes it will be caching. So once you clear and then create a one more access token. Once it is done, just authorize with Swagger once again. And let's see. Here you can see it is authorized successfully, and we are getting the response. Thanks for watching this video. If it is helpful for you, please subscribe and give it thumbs up.